All right, it is 2:05. Hopefully we have everybody here. We're going to start the meeting of the Permit Review Committee of the Commission of Chicago's Landmarks. Today's date is Thursday, November 5th. I'll start with the roll call. Commissioner Jakovich.
Here.
Commissioner Aguirre. Commissioner Aguirre. Commissioner Hughes. Commissioner Osman.
Here. Present.
And, so waiting for Commissioner Hughes and Commissioner Aguirre. Even so, we do have a quorum.
Okay. Sorry.
Commissioner Hughes?
Yes, present.
Okay. And when Commissioner Aguirre shows up, I'll make that note.
She's back.
Sorry about that.
Commissioner Aguirre, no problem.
Present.
So we do have a quorum. Earlier this year, Governor Pritzker signed Public Act 101-0640, making certain amendments to the Open Meetings Act so that we, along with other boards and commissions, can continue to host virtual meetings during this COVID-19 public health emergency, provided that certain conditions are met. One of those conditions that Chairman Leon, as head of the Commission of Chicago Landmarks, determines that in-person meeting of the Commission of Chicago Landmarks is not practical or prudent. I want to make sure that our virtual meetings meets all the conditions of the Open Meetings Act as amended. Therefore, I want to state, pursuant to the newly created section 7E2 of the Open Meetings Act, that Chairman Leon determined that an in-person meeting of this Permit Review Committee of the Commission of Chicago Landmarks is not practical or prudent. Similarly, Chairman Leon made a determination pursuant to the newly created section 7E5 that because of the disaster as declared by the governor, it is unfeasible for at least one member of the Commission on Chicago Landmarks or its chief administrative officer or its chief legal officer to be physically present at the meeting place, in so much that there is no physical meeting place. Pursuant to a resolution adopted by the Commission on Chicago Landmarks on June 4th, 2020, regarding the chairman's emergency rule-making powers, Chairman Leon issued emergency rules governing the conduct of remote public commission meetings and provisions for remote public participation, effective June 23rd, 2020, in response to the COVID-19 emergency. These rules were posted on the Commission's website. In line with those emergency rules, today's regular Permit Review Committee meeting is a virtual meeting being simulcast to the general public via live streaming. Permit Review Committee meetings have been held virtually since May of this year. Meetings are structured to minimize the chances for technical difficulties. Members of the general public have been encouraged to submit written statements in advance of the meeting, and any received have been posted on the Commission's website and are available for the public view during the virtual meeting at www.chicago.gov/CCL. Members of the public desiring to speak at today's meeting were required to register before the meeting. Applicants and their representatives, as well as aldermen, were asked to contact staff if they desire to speak, and they will be able to do so after the staff presentation on a specific project. One person has registered to speak on one agenda item, and we will now hear a statement. Members of the public were asked to limit their statements to 3 minutes regarding agenda item number 2, the project located at 4753 North Broadway. Mr. Warden Miller has signed up to speak. Mr. Miller, can we hear you, please?
Yes, good afternoon, commissioners. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good afternoon again. Ward Miller, for the record, Executive Director of Preservation Chicago. We at Preservation Chicago very much support the reuse of the former Sheridan Trust and Savings Bank. This building is a landmark twice. It's an individual landmark, and it's part of a greater district of approximately 50 buildings known as the Uptown Square Historic Chicago Landmark District. And we find this to be a seminal and gateway building to this historic landmark district, and also a gateway to the Uptown community. It was even a community landmark long before it was even recognized by all of us as a Chicago landmark. So it's a really important building, and therefore a reinvestment in the stellar building is really welcomed. We also want to see this historic building, its exterior, its corridors, and it's an amazing two-story lobby preserved as part of the plan. We understand that to be the case, but want to really emphasize the importance of this building as a monumental gateway to a really fabulous neighborhood, and that is so important to recognize. So we applaud the reinvestment of this building, in this building, and we applaud its reuse idea as a way to preserve its history, and make it a viable building once again. So thank you for your consideration of this. I know that there are some caveats to some features that are to be removed and saved. We would like to see those features placed into the landmark designation report as well, as they'll be saved on site. And really want to say thank you to Cedar Street Companies for their dedication to so many historic buildings in the Uptown area, and to everybody who made this possible. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. And I see that Alderman Keppelman is here. Would you like to speak now, sir, or would you like to wait until after the presentations? It's up to you.
I could speak now.
Okay, that would be great.
So-
You have two projects in your ward today, 4601 North Broadway, the Uptown Square District, as well as the second item is 4753 North Broadway, the former Sheridan Bank and Trust. Please go ahead, Alderman.
Thank you. Well, Ward Miller, he said it so well about the Bridgeview Bank. It's a beautiful building, and I'm glad we're doing everything we can to make sure that it maintains itself for the next 100 years. So thank you, Ward. And the other project, because this is also within the Uptown Square District, is at 4601 North Broadway. With all the beautiful historic buildings here, it's really difficult to come up with a design that complements the other beautiful historic buildings in the area. And I believe this project does just that. It's also right across the street from the newly rebuilt Wilson L station. So it's a transit-oriented development. And I think it really just complements this area so well. So I ask the commission's support on this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alderman. Really appreciate your thoughts. Okay. With that, we're going to start them. Well, I got to do the approval of the meetings of the previous meetings. Those were distributed to you. Actually, revised minutes were distributed to you today, I believe. And you've had a chance to take a look at that. Therefore, I'd like to request a motion to approve the minutes of October 1st, 2020. Do I have a motion?
I so move.
That's Commissioner Osmond that moves it. And a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Hughes. Do the roll call. Commissioner Gary,
Yes.
Commissioner Jekovich,
Yes.
and I approve them as well. The motion passes unanimously. We'll go on to the next item is the property located at 4601 North Broadway in the Uptown Square District. This is a proposed 9-story new construction project for mixed use, including ground floor retail and upper floor residential units and amenity spaces. Joyce, if you could take us through this project, please.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll start off with a little background information on the project. A previous design at this site located at the northwest corner of Wilson Avenue and Broadway Street was reviewed and conditionally approved by the Permit Review Committee in March 2017. The developer proposed to demolish 2 existing 1-story non-contributing structures located at 4601-11 and 4613-17 North Broadway and construct a 9-story mixed-use building. The project has since come under new ownership and a new architect. The design of the new building, which is shown here on the rendering on the left, has changed from the previous design, but is generally the same in height, massing, and materials. Since the conditional approval that was granted in 2017 has expired, the proposed new construction project is back for the Permit Review Committee to review today. Okay. And as you remember, demolition applications for the existing buildings were reviewed and approved by the Commission at the September 2020 meeting. The Commission's recommendations will be forwarded to the City Council. The proposed 9-story mixed-use project is a residential business plan development, and the applicant has been reviewing the proposal with Alderman Kappelman and the community. Given the subject site location at a prominent corner of the district, the overall size, and the scale of the 13-story Broadway Bank building located just 1 block north, and as you can see in the photo on the left and in the block elevation drawing, staff recommends that the proposed massing of the new construction project at 9 stories tall is compatible and recommends approval as proposed. Many of the historic corner buildings in the district incorporate a clipped corner, a rounded corner, or an angled corner, which deviates from the street wall. The main feature of the proposed building includes a prominent canopied retail entrance that is slightly set back from the street frontage in order to emphasize the corner at the Broadway and Wilson intersection. You can see the layout of the slightly set back canopy entrance at the bottom left over here of the first floor plan, and also on the wall section shown here on the right. Consistent with the approved proposal in 2017, the new building spans the full width of the lot along Broadway on the west and the full width along Wilson on the south. Active uses at the ground floor level will include several retail tenants that face Broadway and Wilson and a residential lobby that faces Broadway. The exterior plane of the facade aligns with the property line with recessed entrances. Vehicular access and loading are located at the rear of the property along Winthrop Avenue. So shown here are floors 2 through 8, and these feature 200 dwelling units. And the 9th floor shown here on the left features dwelling units and amenity spaces, which includes a roof deck shown at the bottom portion of the plan, shown here shaded in gray. As per the Commission's guidelines for new construction, contemporary design is encouraged provided that the project is compatible with the historic context. The exterior facade for the proposed building is contemporary, and the proportions and materials are consistent with features in the district. Consistent with the approved proposal in 2017, the main roofline of the 9-story building is 103 feet tall. The primary Broadway frontage shown here in the elevation drawing on the left is anchored at each end by slightly taller towers. The 1-story portions of the building along Broadway and Wilson are clad in a dark gray face brick, and the 1-story base of the 9-story building is clad with smooth cream colored cast stone units punctuated with full height storefronts. The upper floors are clad in a blonde face brick trimmed with stone bands on the 9th floor and topped with a pre-finished metal coating. The southern portion of the 9th floor includes a roof deck, which is partially covered by the tower roof and a metal canopy and is enclosed with an aluminum glass and railing, which is shown here and here. Staff recommends approval for the materials as submitted on the material board shown here on the right. Additionally, staff recommends that typical and large details for the canopies, roof deck railing, windows, storefront, and stone and brick patterns should be provided as part of the permit application. Staff also recommends that drawings of any signage to be attached to the building shall be submitted for review by historic preservation staff under separate permit application submissions. And these are the other elevations of the building. Shown here on the left is the north elevation, which faces the building. The existing building is located just to the north. And on the right is the rear elevation that faces Winthrop Avenue. Okay, and listed here on this slide are the staff recommendations, which were also addressed during the presentation. Both Alderman Kappelman and Uptown United have reviewed the project and have submitted letters in support, which were included in your packet. Alderman Kappelman, Steve Rezebeck, the architect, Dominic Aducci, the owner's rep, and Tyler Manick, the attorney, are here to answer any questions that the commission may have. That concludes my presentation. Please let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Joyce. Does the committee have any questions of Joyce at this time? Seeing none. I did have one quick question. Could you tell us, the existing bank building, what is that material? Is that just limestone?
Not really sure. I can go back to
Go
that.
to that elevation.
This one right here.
No, the one, if you go to
In the right photo at the very
Yeah.
edge.
Oh,
Correct.
right here. I'm sorry.
Yes.
I don't know.
Looks
I don't
like
know if
just
the
a
architect
limestone.
knows about that. I'm sorry. I don't know if Steve Rezebeck, the architect, may know the answer to that question.
We'll,
Yes, this is Steve Rezebeck with Papa George James for the record. And yes, the 1050 West Wilson building, which Commissioner Wong is referring to, is a limestone clad building.
okay, great. And then could you go to that elevation? I think it was the west, no, the south elevation, I think it was. Right there. So what abuts it is going to be that, the darker
Here.
brick. Yeah,
Which seems to be, I get what you're alluding to, Ernie. It seems to be where the existing kind of demolished structure abutted. So it doesn't seem like there's going to be any new effects on the side of that facade of that existing building.
right. Yeah, I also wanted to make sure that it was contrasting enough with the material so that the bank building itself is set aside.
Yeah.
It delineates itself as a separate development. Well, Steve, you've already introduced yourself. Do you have any other comments you'd like to make on this?
No,
Or
I
the
don't
owner.
believe I do have any additional comments. I appreciate the opportunity to work with the PRC committee and Larry Sher to get this project to this point. So we thank you for your cooperation.
Thank you.
I
So-
had a quick question, sorry,
go ahead.
about the bank building. On the facade that's abutting the new developments, are there any windows on that side?
No, there are not. That is actually a party wall, and it's a solid masonry wall.
Okay, great. Sounds good. I was wondering about the shadows of the new development, if there were windows, but sounds like it's already taken care of.
Any other questions of the committee? Of the architect or the owner's representative or the attorney? Having none, I'd like to call for a motion to approve the staff recommendations for this project.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Osmond. I just want to say
Okay.
Peter Street's done a lot of wonderful restorations in the city, and I really congratulate them on their sensitive restorations of these landmarks.
Thank you. So there is a motion by Commissioner Osmond. Is there a second? Anybody?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Gary. I'll do the roll call. Commissioner Chekovich,
Yes.
Commissioner Hughes,
Yes.
and I'm voting yes as well. The motion carries unanimously. Congratulations, folks. And we're looking forward to that. One real quick question, actually, before you guys leave. You got retail at the bottom floor. I hope you're talking to people already. It's been a tough year, and as the Alderman is nodding his head, he's probably expecting that as well. So hopefully we're going to get some stuff there. So, all right. Next project is a property located at 4753 North Broadway. This is a former Sheridan Bank and Trust building. Proposed renovation of a 12-story former bank building, including residential conversion, modifications to the former banking hall, and a one-story rooftop addition to an existing mechanical penthouse. And Larry, I think this is yours, if you can tell us what's going on.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is definitely the Uptown meeting. So the former Sheridan Bank and Trust was designated a Chicago landmark in 2007 as part of the Neighborhood Banks Buildings Thematic District. The designation included some of the most outstanding examples of historic banks, constructed between 1907 and 1929. The Sheridan Bank and Trust was erected in 1924 and 25 as an 8-story bank and office building designed by the firm Marshall and Fox. In 1928, 4 additional floors were constructed, designed by Huzzah and Hill. In 1940, the name of the bank was changed to Uptown National Bank, and in 2003, it was renamed the Bridgeview Bank. Cedar Street purchased this building in 2019 and proposes to rehabilitate it for new commercial and residential uses. Ground floor retail and commercial spaces will remain, while the double height banking hall will be repurposed as shared office workspace, and the upper floors will be converted into 176 units of rental housing. The applicant is also applying for federal historic preservation tax credits, and their application is currently under review at the National Park Service. So the designated features of the building includes all the exterior elevations and roof lines of the building, but it also includes some significant interior features as well, and I'll run through those very briefly. The first floor building entrance vestibules on North Broadway and West Lawrence Avenue, the corridor connecting those 2 vestibules, the elevator lobby, the staircase from the first floor to the basement, and the main staircase leading from the first floor to the banking hall, all in their entirety. And this includes an ornamental gate at the entrance to the 2nd floor banking hall. Designated features also include that 2nd floor banking hall in its entirety, including the open mezzanine level, railings and historic teller stations, and check writing stands. The ordinance also goes into some detail about how these interior spaces can be modified in order to accommodate new uses, and we will get into those a little bit later in the presentation. Let's go to the next slide. So these are photos just to orient you to the designated interior spaces on the first floor. And you can see photo labeled A is that corridor, kind of the north-south oriented portion of it. The photo labeled B shows the elevator lobby and an ornamental stair going down to the basement. Photo C shows a non-designated staircase near the Broadway entrance. D is the ornamental stair leading up into that banking hall, and E is one of those decorative vestibules on the building. Let's go to the next slide. So this is the outlined in red is the portion of this first floor corridor, and this is a marble and terrazzo corridor that connects the Broadway and Lawrence entrances. They are proposing to modify that north-south portion to accommodate expansion of an existing door in order to address the needs for residential trash collection and mail delivery. These changes are minor and are recommended for approval. However, the proposed floor plan includes 4 narrow display areas created using partitions set back approximately 3 feet from the interior storefronts along the corridor. Staff recommends that these be redesigned to maintain views from the corridor into the interior spaces, either through the use of deeper setbacks or elimination or reduction of those proposed partitions. They are also proposing to separate the residential and commercial elevators in that elevator lobby. And you see in graphic F, they have rendered as kind of a glass separating wall. And this is attached through narrow metal channels to the floors and wall. And the glass divider remains below a fairly decorative plaster ceiling. And this is a treatment that the Commission has approved for other landmark buildings with designated interior spaces, and we're recommending that this would not adversely impact that designated space. On the bottom image, there's another rendering labeled G, and that is the stairs to the south of the Broadway entrance. Now, these were not included as a designated feature, but that lobby space is, and Fire Code requires that that stair be enclosed, the enclosure itself had the potential to impact that designated lobby space. So the applicant proposes to utilize a glass enclosure connecting to the floor with sort of a 1-foot soffit attached to the flat portion of the ceiling. And staff is recommending that this would minimally impact the designated features of the lobby, as well as maintaining views to that decorative cast iron stair. So these are some photos to orient you to the banking floor, and that is a flight up from that first floor space. And they're proposing to modify the banking hall to accommodate a new co-working business. And you can see that there are some highly decorative features here, plaster ceilings, columns, some historic fixtures, including registration desks and check writing tables, and things of that nature. Let's move to the next slide. So the applicant intends to use the double height central space to accommodate a variety of working and seating areas, and they're proposing to remove that raised marble reception desk. They maintain that this former reception desk would require ramps for accessibility, which would limit available space and decrease their seating capacity. They also assert that retention of that desk would impact the surrounding paths of travel, making the primary ornamental space less usable as a co-working facility. Staff does recommend approval of the removal of that reception desk, provided that the applicant proposes a compatible flooring treatment in its place, subject to staff review and approval. Staff further recommends that that reception desk be disassembled and stored on site should reinstallation or adaptive reuse become possible in the future. So the applicants are also proposing to insert office enclosures into this banking hall space to allow for individual private offices. In some cases, these enclosures are located at the, in some cases, these enclosures are located sort of freestanding, and you can see a graphic in the center on the top showing how they propose to install 6 offices, and a rendering below showing that this will really be just attached at the floor. However, many of the enclosures are located at the periphery of the building and are proposed to attach to the existing window system. The applicant has provided details to show how the vertical and horizontal partitions intersect at the historic windows. The office ceilings are proposed to be held back at least 3 inches from the horizontal window mullions in order to allow for air circulation while providing acoustical privacy. Staff recommends approval of the proposed office enclosures, provided the detailed drawing showing the exact thickness of all partitions and their relationship to historic window mullions are submitted for review and approval with the permit plans. The overall dimensions and thickness of these partitions should be no wider than those existing mullions. And there's some additional graphics that kind of clarify how these will work. Okay, so now we are talking about these historic teller cages and banking fixtures. They are proposing to retain the front of the original teller stations, but to remove and replace the remaining metal wire lattices and replacing those with glass partitions for privacy. The existing metal framework will be retained and modified to accept clear glass panels, and there's a detail of how that would look on the left side of your screen. So per the designated ordinance, removal of teller cages and grills is permitted when necessary to make the space suitable for new use. As noted in the ordinance, at least 1 teller station representative section and 1 check writing stand are to be retained. So in this case, all of the banking floor teller stations are to be retained, although modified. The applicant does intend to retain and relocate all historic check writing tables, but those locations have not yet been finalized. And you see a photo of one of those check writing tables, which I'm sure have to weigh like 600 or 700 pounds. Okay, next slide. So now we are going up to the mezzanine of the banking floor, which is sort of surrounds that central space and overlooks it with railings. The applicant is proposing to create additional offices on the second banking floor. These are located at the perimeter of the floor, and the vertical partitions terminate against columns or window mullions intended to match the details on the second floor. This banking floor contains a highly decorative plastic ceiling, and it's approximately 8 feet 5 inches at the lowest point. This makes the space too low to build secondary ceilings for the new offices. Instead, the applicant proposes installing glass partitions, which follow the shape of the very decorative ceiling medallions, connecting with metal channels at the floor and at the flat portion of the ornamental ceiling. They have provided sufficient details to show how these partitions will avoid damaging ornamental features. Such an installation would be easily reversible while maintaining views of the historic ceiling, and staff recommends approval of those proposed office partitions. And of course, you see a rendering of how that would actually look on the upper right. Let's go to the next slide. So the existing fluorescent lighting fixtures are attached directly to many of the ornamental ceiling medallions. The applicant is proposing to remove these fixtures and replace them with more contemporary LED fixtures while maintaining the existing lighting attachments. They maintain that such overhead lighting is essential to the proper functioning of the space as an office. The proposed lighting fixtures will not conceal or further damage any historic ornamental features and are somewhat smaller than the existing fixtures. Staff recommends approval of this approach, provided that no new attachments through ornamental features shall be made, and lighting specifications to be included in the permit plans for staff review and approval. There are some other exterior modifications proposed. They are looking to modify 2 existing storefronts. On the east elevation, one storefront is proposed to be enlarged to accommodate trash removal, and a louver is proposed for the transom area. Staff recommends approval, provided that a decorative grille can be utilized to screen the industrial character of that louver. They are also proposing to install a new door and side light on one of the storefront bays on the north elevation. Staff recommends approval, provided that the profiles, finish, and color of the new mullions match the existing, and that all glass be clear vision. Staff further recommends that any historic terracotta be removed and retained on site for future installation should it be required. They're also proposing a substantial window replacement project for the building. Now, all the historic windows were previously replaced with aluminum windows, and those are now in poor condition. In order to provide an adequate energy standard and visual consistency, the applicant proposes to install new aluminum double hung windows on floors 4 through 13 with an extruded brick mold profile to approximate the historic conditions. The window cladding and brick mold shall have a dark non-reflective color, subject to staff review and approval. They are also proposing expansion of an existing rooftop mechanical penthouse as an amenity space for the residents of the building. The expansion includes the addition of a rectangular space of approximately 38 feet by 39 feet outlined in red. There's a setback to the east parapet of about 56 feet and a setback to the north parapet of about 18 feet. The maximum height of the expanded enclosure is approximately 13 feet 9 inches above the roof deck, while the height of the historic parapet on the northwest and east is approximately 10 feet high. The applicant has provided renderings from vantage points to illustrate that this enclosure and pergola will be minimally visible within the district. Staff recommends approval of the rooftop enclosure, provided that it has a dark non-reflective color. Such a treatment will allow the rooftop addition to recede from view, and similar treatments have been approved for other landmark projects of comparable scale. Okay, so these are all our recommendations, and I'm pretty sure I touched on all of these in the course of my presentation, so I won't read them through unless you want me to. That pretty much concludes my presentation. If you've got questions for me, and I know the development team is also in the meeting if you have questions for them.
Great. Thank you, Larry. Does the committee have any questions of Larry at this time?
I do, Commissioner Osmond.
Commissioner Osmond, please.
Yeah, first of all, I want to apologize to Cedar Street for associating them with the prior development. My apologies on that, and I do, but I do like their work, which we're seeing now. I do want to understand a bit more about the removal of the banking reception desk. I always am concerned with that's just, you know, having seen the bank, that's such a significant part of the banking floor. And when I hear that it's going to be put in storage for later use, I you know, when reading in advance, trying to understand the significance of how you're going to do that. So what's the plans for it? And do we really think that's going to happen? Because in looking at it here, it looks like it could be accommodated, not the check writing, the banking, the one before this, Larry.
With the open hall
Uh,
seating.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's go
Open
back
hall
a
seating
couple
So-
slides.
It
My-
looks like
my
it could be
recommendation-
accommodated there. And
Yeah.
it really is a beautiful feature. So I just understand that a bit better.
So Commissioner Osmond, I appreciate that question, and I actually had the same question, and apparently so did Commissioner Hughes. Why don't we do this? Let's have the applicant make some comments, because I think a lot of these questions, and I have a number of them as well, and maybe we could get all of these questions answered all at the same time. So,
Absolutely. Thank you, Larry.
Yeah, before they do that, I do want to mention that that previous slide, it kind of showed that they did a little layout to show how that space would have to operate if you had to install ramps to get people up and into it. Because I realized I didn't mention that it's actually the floor of that reception desk is raised up a couple of feet. So you would need to be able to allow people to get into it. They had some concerns about how that would impact the space, but you're absolutely right. The applicants can address that far better than I can.
So it's a 24-inch approximate height difference.
You know, I'm not exactly sure, but I know that their architects can answer
Okay,
that question.
Great. Okay. Mr. Heffron.
Yes, Mark Heffron, representing the applicant. First off, thank you, Larry. There's a lot going on in the structure, and I know this application has a lot for you to get your head around, and I appreciate your patience in working with us and understanding what we're trying to do in the space. To try to address Commissioner Osmond's initial question, you know, the effort to do an adaptive reuse development plan in this building was challenging. Obviously, we contemplated a lot of different uses for the main banking hall. We landed on co-working and feel very strongly that might be the only use that could allow us to preserve the space in a manner that'd be acceptable to the City of Chicago Landmark Department and obviously the SHPO office as we pursue historical tax credits in the project. We see that main space as kind of being the heart of the entire building. And I think that our ability to program it with modern furniture to make it a very inviting and welcoming space is critical to our development plan. In addition to that, we also have a significant amount of seating that is popular in the co-working world, where people want access to the building. They have access to the building's amenities like the gym, the rooftop, so on and so forth. And they'll also have access to, if you're a co-working member, you'll have access to Cedar Street's entire portfolio. If there's a pool in a building that's near you, so on and so forth. But regardless, I think that area also it's required for us to generate enough income. So we do have what they call hot desks that we are programming throughout that main open floor. So it's a combination of very welcoming furniture, a place for people to leave their co-working suite and have a casual conversation outside of their office in that main area, and then also have it kind of be surrounded by a few big long tables that are rented out as hot desks. That main center existing piece really makes it hard to do any of that because it is bulky, and the amount of seating that we'd be able to provide and the number of things that we need to do would be significantly decreased. It'd be a much different experience walking onto that floor. And I think we have a pretty good reputation in the world of preservation at this point, and I think this is one of the bigger asks that we have to make. You know, we brought it up to Anna Margaret from the SHPO office right away, saying this is something that we think, you know, is integral to our development plan. Our ability to control just this open space here allows us to keep all the teller windows. It allows us to keep, you know, the backdrop of the space. And we think it's critical for us to be able to make that center area very, very open, welcoming, and inviting. And I think that if you've ever been to the lobby of Lawrence House, you might have some confidence in our ability to program kind of a modern, comfortable space within the backdrop of an actually, you know, a very historically relevant space. And we see an even bigger opportunity here because the extent of historical character is far greater. So that's our vision for the main area. One more point and I'll shut up. I think I've been a little long-winded here. We are planning on keeping a number of the check writing stations throughout. They will be in new places. Again, they're kind of sitting in the middle of the banking hall to support that use, obviously. So those will be relocated throughout the space. We do intend to move them around and make them functional. They'll have a lot of the lamps that are existing on them today. And we actually have a few of them identified and planned already. So those will remain in the space mostly.
And there was no place to accommodate anywhere in this development or on the roof as a bar or anything that significant reception desk?
The desk, no, just because it's so large. It really is big in the context of that space. It doesn't seem as large. We'd be happy to reuse some of the marble and incorporate it into the rooftop addition and incorporate it into our plan. We could get really creative with it. We feel like that'd be something we're good at, and we could even incorporate it into the co-working kitchen, which is in the annex, the adjacent building that isn't landmarked. But if it's supposed to be preserved for potentially a reinstallation later, you know, we obviously could do that as well. We'd follow the lead of, you know, either SHPO or the City of Chicago Landmark Department. If reinstallation sooner than later is the preference, we could do that. But we just probably can't reinstall the entire assembly because it's large and it wouldn't fit into the building necessarily anywhere else.
Larry, can you take us back to that drawing, please?
Perhaps I'm not actually in charge of the slideshow, but here it is.
Oh,
Awesome.
yes, thank you. I'm in total agreement with Commissioner Osmond on this one. It feels like it.
Yeah, I'm going to ask this question. Did you look at any kind of furniture layouts with the reception area in place? I mean, are there any, you know, pieces of trace that you've thrown away that show furnishing layout with that in place to try to accommodate for as much seating as possible?
And I'm sorry, before you answer, Mark, I want to add on to that too. Have you considered just removing the raised floor within it? Like, is that a heavy lift to somehow decrease the height of the floor as much as possible within it?
We definitely have floor plans, Larry. I'm not sure if I believe we may have shared them with you even, where we illustrated in plan view kind of a version with the existing reception desk and without. And you know, the amount of seating it's significant. It really is. I think that there is no historical floor that's necessarily there, that's below it. I'm not sure that removing the platform is viable. We didn't study that option. I can't answer that honestly. But we definitely studied the floor plan with and without it, and feel like our attempt to pull off an adaptive reuse of this space from a banking hall, which obviously no one can support these days, to something more modern. It's significant. And I think we went into this eyes wide open, thinking also that the State Historical Preservation Office would take a hardline stance on whether that would be acceptable at all. We started with them right away, even before we purchased the building. I think we approached them to try to get a read on whether that was an option. We do have their support with our Part 2 application. It's been through the SHPO's office, and they have supported the removal. The application is with the National Park Service currently, so we don't have a full Part 2 approval, but we have made our way through the SHPO's office, and we understand that this is something that's a little bit of an ask, but feel like it's the one element here that makes the adaptive reuse happen while preserving, I mean, an absolute majority of the rest of the space. The flow, the light that flows in and out of the different spaces, the general layouts, it's all maintained. And I think that the middle hall here is meant to feel open. It will just be, it'll feel open with modern furniture versus that reception desk, which it greatly reduces our ability to program that space. I can tell you we did study that.
Does anybody, if we could, let's move off the reception area for a second. I had a couple of questions actually regarding the teller cages. And you're saying that you're going to partially remove some of those bars, et cetera, and replace them with glass. Is that even necessary? I mean, wouldn't you be able to keep everything in place and just install the glass if you needed that extra privacy? And here's where I'm going with this. In the previous administration in Washington, D.C., I used to go and spend a lot of time in D.C. and would stay at the W Hotel down there. The W Hotel is a former bank building as well. And some of the work that they did there, retaining not only the safe, but the teller windows, all of the teller stuff was just incredible. And I would highly recommend including the reception desk as well. They reuse it as a bar, and we're very successful at it. I would, I'd recommend that you take a look at what they did in retaining a lot of that stuff.
Can I clarify one thing on the teller cages? The front of the teller window experience is intended to remain intact fully. There is a what I deem to be a more functional cage element that's at the back of where the teller would stand. So what you see in the lower right picture there would be maintained fully, but there's a cage. It's like a wire mesh that is a full panel that kind of backs where the teller would stand previously. And we feel like we could infill the cage with glass and allow and have new doors in there, and that would provide a historically relevant semi-private working experience. There would still not be full acoustic privacy for those people renting those spaces, but you would still get a lot of natural light that would pass into the space from the windows. The teller experience from the front would be maintained, but there wouldn't be the old cage that make you feel like you're potentially working in a cage. It's the element that's behind the teller window in particular that we're proposing to remove and infill with glass, but the front would be maintained as you see it in that picture. A point of clarification. I don't know if you were maybe assuming that we're going to alter the front of the teller windows as well.
That was my assumption.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm gonna also say that I don't know. I appreciate the feature of the cage, and when Larry was going through the presentation, I found it very unfortunate that feature. I'm assuming the mesh portion you're talking about is the upper left portion of this screen here, and then has the glass below it. And like so in this bottom photo on the left side that has the proposed and existing. I think Ernie's point about seeing if there's a way you can keep that feature and also use the glass for the acoustic privacy. I want to second that and recommend that as well, because these features, I mean, you just don't see this anymore in old bank buildings. And if there's a chance to preserve it, I would highly recommend you go that route. The other thing I want to, if no one else has any questions about the cages, I wanted to speak about another feature.
Hello, this is Greg Gibson with Level Architecture Incorporated. just to stay on the cages for 1 second. Larry, could you elaborate on the portion of the ordinance that allows for modification of the backside of these teller areas?
So yeah, I can talk a little bit about that because now when the neighborhood bank building designating district was put into place, most of these bank buildings included significant amounts of interior spaces and features. Now, the way that that ordinance was written was also to allow a certain amount of flexibility to modify these interior spaces and features should the new use require that. Now, the commission is 100% within their rights to determine if that is the case for this proposed use. As far as the teller cages are referenced in the ordinance, I could actually read it if you're interested in hearing that. So what the ordinance says is the commission will approve the removal or relocation of historic teller stations, which include the counters as well as any cages or grills to the extent such remain, and check writing stands to the extent any remain and are included as part of the significant features, if these features restrict either one, the continued use or modernization of the banking hall for banking purposes, or two, the ability to reuse the space if the banking hall ceases to be used for banking purposes and is to be converted to another use, provided that at least one teller station, representative section, and one check writing stand are retained. These representative banking fixtures are preferred to be retained within the banking hall, subject to the review and approval of the commission. However, the banking fixtures may be relocated, including to another, preferably publicly accessible location in the building, and two, the retained representative section of the teller station may be modified or altered in order to accommodate its relocation. Only the front public-facing finished portions of the historic teller stations need be retained. The back of house portion of the teller counters may be modernized, modified, or removed without limitation. And that was basically incorporated into the ordinance because when it was written, it was anticipated that there would in fact need to be a certain amount of flexibility in order to make these spaces usable.
Thank you, Larry. The clarification.
Thank you, Larry. So I think that the part that we're sort of hanging our hat on was right at the end there, allowing for this modification. Thanks, Larry.
Now, I do want to talk about the glass insertions, and I had some of the same concerns. I think the good thing about the glass insertion is that they're using those existing channels, which previously contained those grills, to actually support the new glass insertions.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Commissioner Hughes, you had other questions?
Yeah. Sorry, one quick clarification, Larry. You said basically where the mesh is on those frames, they're removing the mesh and putting in glass. So the whole frame will remain?
That's my understanding. And I asked for details and they gave me some sections. I'm not quite sure if the dimensions are going to need to be modified or not, but the intent, as I understand it, is exactly that, to retain the frame and the channels and just do the insertions.
Yeah, I can echo that. The existing, so there's sort of a primary and a secondary frame. The primary frame, which you see, is the main vertical at the top, or the main horizontal at the top, the wider horizontal at the middle, and then there's another horizontal at the bottom. And then that has vertical pieces. That's kind of the primary frame, and that will remain. There's a secondary frame that fits within that holds this metal cage. That frame will come out, and a new frame will go in that holds glass. So using the existing structure that's there, essentially, and taking out the secondary frame, which just serves to hold the mesh.
Yeah, I would recommend, pending this moves forward, Larry, for you to add to the notes to have this approved, like have a mock-up and have it approved ahead of time before the full installation, because without the details, we don't really know how that's gonna turn out and if it's gonna work.
I think we can certainly incorporate that into our recommended conditions.
My other concern was actually pertaining to the glass as well, particularly where it's enclosing the stair, the featured stair. I don't.
Let's go back a couple slides, perhaps. There we go. The bottom right image. Yes, yes.
Yes. So what is the spacing between the stair and the glass? I just feel like that's a channel to like collect a bunch of unwanted dust, dirt, grime, whatever. What is that spacing? Do we know?
You know, I will let the architect answer that precisely. I was told that it was at least a foot in order to allow some type of access. But you're right, it is quite tight. I do want to mention that, interestingly, although 2 of the staircases were included as designated features in that lobby, this one, for whatever reason, was not. And I'm not sure if it's because they anticipated there would be fire code issues, but this is their attempt to address those issues and also retain some views into that space. My understanding is this would not be a stair that would be used regularly.
Understood.
Yeah, well, Commissioner Hughes, I'm glad you kind of brought this up. This was actually one of my issues as well. I just didn't really understand what the purpose of viewing into this particular stairwell was, and if it was even necessary. It looks just weird with this glass, enclosure of a stairwell that, I would have almost preferred it to be a solid wall, quite frankly, and be able to use space, that is closest to us in a better way. But what I heard, though, during your presentation was that there is something dealing with National Park Service or something which needs this to be exposed.
So National Park Service is also reviewing this project, and they are not held to the same designating ordinance that we are. So
Yes.
they're looking much more generally at these interior features and trying to determine which are the most significant. And my understanding is that this was a solution that they've seen and approved, at least preliminarily. But our concern was really how this relates to the impact to the ceiling. And that's, quite a decorative element. I do want to say that I wish I had a better photo of the stairs in this presentation, because they are quite decorative, even though they weren't included as a designated feature. And retaining views to those stairs, in my opinion, is desirable.
I mean, it's amicable, but I don't. I'm kind of with Ernie on this one. Maybe there's a better way to retain the view. And yes, I do want to hear from the architect on the spacing and accessibility of that channel.
I mean, and maybe it is just the frame that bothers me. It seemed just really super heavy, particularly the door. I've just seen much better glass enclosures that have been a lot more elegant, I guess.
Would it be acceptable if they did butt joints for those panels, those 3 panels, rather than sort of a mullion dividing them?
These are already shown as butt joints at the 3 verticals in the field there. And I can give some color to this stair. So the requirement for enclosure was really a negotiation with the fire department. This is a 2-hour rated stair up above that comes down and is basically open to the lobby. And so after much debate, with the fire department. We determined that an enclosure was required at the first floor lobby. And what we were able to negotiate is that enclosure would be a 1 hour fire rating rather than a 2 hour fire rating, which allows for slightly lighter glass framing, but will still require the frames as you see them in this rendering. So we've already kind of pared down the framing to what's considered to be the minimum thickness. The position of the wall is sort of difficult because the bottom tread flares out and has a rounded edge that faces the lobby. And so it pushes the wall out into the lobby. In doing so, when you run straight vertically from that point, you're out into what is a decorative cove in the ceiling. So we're not able to really take the wall straight up. We would kind of hit a very awkward condition at the ceiling, which is where this sort of short horizontal soffit was introduced that aligns with adjacent trim and kind of caps the top of this enclosure. There is like, I think it's 16 inches in between the wall, the glass and the wall. And that's basically a function of that bottom tread that flares out. So we think it is serviceable to be cleaned. And that's kind of where this stair came from, or the enclosure came from.
Thanks, Greg. Mark Heffern again, representing the applicant. I wanted just to mention that we have Emily Ramsey from McRosty Historical Advisors on the line too. If you guys want to hear about the technical requirement as it relates to the SHPO National Park Service review, it is my understanding the visibility of the stair is a strict requirement based on previous experience in tax credit deals, and something that they're gonna definitely demand as a hard and fast requirement on their end.
Yes, this is Emily Ramsey with McRosty. I can speak to that. So Mark is right that unlike with the landmarks ordinance, federal historic tax credit applications allow the Park Service sort of free rein on reviewing anything on the exterior and on the interior of the entire building. And in our experience and in our discussions with Anna Margaret Barris at SHPO, the Park Service does not allow for enclosure of stairs that are historically opened with a solid partition. They will want to maintain views through those primary spaces, and they consider the stair to be a primary space opening into the lobby. And so this is a typical solution that the Park Service will allow, this sort of glazed enclosure at a stair. And, in the similar way to the elevator lobby glass wall, as long as partitions or enclosures are fully glazed, that's an acceptable solution for the Park Service. But they will require that we keep this open visually.
Thank you, Emily. I think the concern here was, and Larry, maybe you can add this into your notes too. I think just the look and feel of this is not really compatible with the purpose of it being open and providing that view to the historic stair. I think Ernie's point was that the door and the sort of heaviness around the frame, if that could be minimized a bit more, that would be a lot better. And probably to Emily's point about keeping that view as beautiful and clean and simple as possible to that stair would contribute to that. I also just want to say as a general comment, when our staff, when they request drawings, it's for purposes like this. There's been a ton of just clarifications around details and conditions that I think more clear drawings could have provided and helped us, because we view this stuff ahead of time. And even reviewing this week, I had a ton of questions about this and it wasn't very clear to me. So when we request the drawings and when Larry and the staff are requesting that, it's not to be a burdensome, it's to help us better understand what you guys are attempting to do with the preservation features.
Thank you, Commissioner Hughes. Are there any other questions that the committee has of either the applicant or? I did have two more items that I wanted to cover. One of them was if you go forward 2 or 3 slides, let's see, to the partitions that you're wrapping around the ceiling. It was a weird configuration. I think it's the next slide in. No, one more.
Are you referring to the glass wall that's
Yeah, the glass
follows
wall,
the
right there.
shape, this one?
Right
Okay.
there, yeah.
Mhm.
So there are 2 comments that I had on this. Is there any way around this? And I understand, the desire to, well, I guess the first question I had was, does the glass need to go all the way to the ceiling? Or is that imperative that has to occur in order to kind of not have this kind of crazy shape wrapping around the ceiling, this octagon up there. And then alongside of this, this photograph in the upper right with these light fixtures just are terrible. And I know you're doing some exchanging of light fixtures, but even with new LEDs, just, if there was anything a little, I guess, more decorative, and that's coming from a Miesian person,
I will defer to the architects to address that. My understanding is that it related to the limited height of that floor, the inability to insert sort of a secondary ceiling, and desires to sort of retain views to those ornamental features. It is a partition shape that we have never seen before, but we are trying to be open and flexible to allow the reuse of some of these very ornamental spaces.
It's definitely very conspicuous. And I'm reflecting on, the need for privacy and reconciling program and like form. It does feel there are a lot of gymnastics to achieve something that visually it's just it's challenging. Specifically because you have to use the support of the glass on the top and on the bottom. So it just accentuates very, very strongly those lines. So I'm with Commissioner Wong on thinking, and I'm sure you did, it's just not in this presentation, and I'm looking at previous materials submitted, if there was another option here. Because I feel like this wants to emphasize transparency while maximizing space for the enclosed area. Yet what it's doing is accentuating the line on the ceiling and on the floor. So if that is the desired effect, I think it's in a way contradicting with the spirit of this place, the feeling of continuity, but I'm just curious.
Hey, Greg, real quick, I'll take one pass and I'll let you go too. From a program standpoint, again, Mark Heffron, applicant here. The program here obviously is to provide some level of private office. And if you look at the overall floor plan, there isn't much private office in our floor plan. And the space is very open. It was originally open, and using glass, that was our intent all along, was to provide that light to filter in throughout the space to the middle of the space and provide some private space to lease out. And regardless, at some point in an adaptive reuse play, there's got to be something that happens. This is another one that is unique to an office. And I think that you have to look at how often this really happens. It doesn't happen that often. And the mezzanine space, this is the 3rd floor. is where this occurs, and the ceiling height is lower. So that's part of the problem. I can let Greg talk about specifics. And real quick, there's some things in our plan, like light fixtures that aren't necessarily obvious in all of our plans, but we intend to bring back some large light fixtures that are era specific into our plan throughout. There are some non-specific mid-century fixtures that are scattered throughout the space that will go away, and we're going to bring back more. We're going to have fabricated new Art Deco fixtures. Again, running this all through the Park Service review that we think will be phenomenal in the space. There'll be big features, and we do intend to, and I believe this is a condition to the approval. We intend to improve the lighting throughout, but we want to do it in a manner where we touch the plaster, to the least amount possible, because there's so much detail up there. We don't want to take the ceiling down and put it back up for a lighting plan. So we're going to be real careful about what we do with lighting, but we intend to do a lot more lighting with table lamps throughout the space, and rely in a lot of ways less on the fixtures you see in this picture. So I wanted to hit on both of Commissioner Wong's questions. Greg, I don't know if you want to elaborate on some of the ceiling conditions or your opinion of the space as well.
Yeah, sure. Greg Gibson with Level. So obviously this is a strange condition, and to have the requirement for privacy was paramount. And so, we did go through kind of an iterative process of, is there a way to hold this down? And then if there's a secondary ceiling, aren't you just mostly hiding the decorative nature of the ceiling that's there? And, we want to see that. That's of critical importance. And there's, over time, there have been some non-historic walls added in these areas to enclose offices. And you can see how whoever did that work struggled with the idea of privatizing these offices. And the other tragedy with those walls is that they block all the light that's coming in at the mezzanine level from these windows. So glass was definitely, so privacy is paramount. Glass was definitely the first choice and the intention. And how to intersect the ceiling, we talked about and discussed at length and looked at other options. But I think if it's this kind of line of structure that's drawing your eye, we can certainly tame that down by the color selection of the channels that's supporting the glass. To this point, the general feel for most of the metal in the banking hall is dark, kind of an oil rub bronze or black color. And so we were keeping with that metal language, but I think we could also entertain at the ceiling, a channel that matches the color of the ceiling, and then maybe that helps to not draw your eye to that line as much. Similarly, at the floor, the channel could match whatever the flooring ends up being.
And this is Emily Ramsey again, just to kind of reiterate the existing condition. And I don't know if there was a photo in this presentation that shows the existing condition. And, historically, these areas on the mezzanine level were not enclosed offices, and enclosed offices were added by the previous owner. And so they're solid walls that stop just short of the historic ceiling. And they really do block the views of the ceiling beyond in those offices and block the views into the space. And so I think from the beginning, the intention here was to figure out a way to have those offices, but to kind of restore the openness in the mezzanine that it would have had historically.
If I could just jump in on one more thing. Our intention, and I apologize for the photo of the light fixture that's included in this package, but our intention here is to not use again, linear strips, these fluorescents that are here now, we all agree are bad. There are penetrations through the existing ceiling that we want to reuse or repair. And so a new fixture, as you can see from the drawing down below, the rectangular fixtures are dashed those will be removed. New fixtures will be inserted at the connection point, at the existing connection point. And those fixtures are TBD at this point, but certainly something that you guys can review and approve. But it would be more of a surface mounted decorative fixture that is a single point rather than a linear.
Okay. Well, thank you for answering our questions to the best of your ability. You know, I understand that you're kind of in a rough place, you know, kind of straddling between our commission as well as National Park Service and the state, and which is why Emily is so important. And I appreciate that. Is you know, given the things that you're challenged with, I am hoping that that you can continue this dialogue with staff. You've heard our concerns. Unless unless any of the committee people have any immediate solutions to this, I am going to ask for a motion to approve the staff recommendations for this. Do I have a motion?
I'll motion to approve.
Commissioner Jekovich, there's a motion on the table. Is there a second? I'll second it. I will do the roll call. Commissioner Osmond.
Approved.
Commissioner Aguirre.
I'm really torn with this one. What are my options? Can I just be present?
You can be just present.
Okay, present. Thank you.
Commissioner Hughes.
I am also just present on this one.
Okay, so we have 3 approved, 2 present. The motion carries. Larry, I'm going to hope that you can kind of understanding our concerns to continue this dialogue.
No, just one final.
So-
You know, I think that they're all tough conditions, and I appreciate all the comments and the concerns from the commission. I think that, you know, with regard to that the mezzanine level condition, I thought that was a good comment about trying to minimize the, you know, the channel for the glass in terms of its appearance. But I do appreciate from the design perspective that you're, you know, locating in a place where you're not affecting the decorative ceiling too much. So I think that, you know, just something to think about on that particular detail. Thanks.
So just before we move on, I just want to confirm that the commission has motion seconded and approved all of our conditions without any revisions or alterations.
One more comment. Sorry, on the Commissioner Hughes, on the desk. There should be some sort of, and I'm sure maybe this is a rule by the commission, but there should be some sort of manual, that instruction booklet of how that of how that desk will, if it is going to be dismantled and preserved somewhere, that there's a way of putting it back together, that they're kind of labeled pieces and such like that. That's it.
Larry, there were other notes that were given throughout the discussion that I want to just make sure was included or it's being amended to this staff recommendations list.
So if you don't mind, let's run through those so that we have a clear understanding of the direction that we're getting. One that I heard very clearly was to arrange a mock-up of the teller cage alterations so we could review and approve that insertion prior to work being complete. What other types of review would you like us to perform as a part of this approval?
I think Commissioner Jekovich comments about the desk were also
And the dismantlement and storage of that should be incorporated into the permit plans. Okay, that's 2.
I'm going to suggest that the mesh from the caging gets recycled, or something happens with that that doesn't end up in a landfill.
Okay. We're pushing our review authority, but we will incorporate that as best we can.
Thank you.
Ask a
Go ahead.
question about how we feel. One of the suggestions was that they dismantle the desk and they utilize some materials and other features in the building. How confident are we that the desk will ever see the light of day, or will it be put into storage? And do we, go for that as an opportunity to at least utilize some of that beautiful material throughout the building?
Yeah, I can't answer that.
Emily,
maybe
is
the
that
applicant.
something, Emily, is that something that you might be able to weigh in on?
Sure. And again, recognizing that these are two completely separate review processes with their own problems and picadillos, but the Park Service typically for I don't think they would support complete removal and reinstallation of the desk, like on the roof or something. I have a feeling they would push back on that, just because they would want it, if they require it to be retained, then moving it to a location where it never historically existed may be an issue. And I think, if it's stored, if it's cataloged and stored on site, then there is, an opportunity in the future for that to be reassembled and come back. I'm not sure what they would say about using pieces of it. If it was used to, to repair other marble areas that needed repair, sometimes it's hard to get a stone match. So that's something that they've approved before, is, removing, salvaging material so that you can repair in other places. But I'm not sure actually.
So Commissioner Osmond, it sounds to me that that probably would not be an option to reuse bits and parts of the reception desk. It would either be stored, disassemble it, stored in place, hope that it comes back in some, in its location, same location at some later date, is the best we could go for. Which is not the answer you want to hear.
So I just want to say that this is really the challenge of interior designated spaces, is that, the easiest thing to approve is nothing at all. And a project like this really pushes the commission to try and visualize how this can be reused and how these significant features can be retained as much as possible, given that there are going to need to be changes to the space. So I know I talked a lot about this one, but I felt it was important to say that, because we have a number of these designated neighborhood banks, and we're hoping to see more projects which will reuse them.
Go to the bathroom.
I've been on mute all this time. We have voted, and let's move on to the next thing. I am recommending that this applicant please Google the W Hotel in Washington, D.C. Take a look at what they've done.
Will do, Commissioner Wong. Thank you all. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next project is located at 3804 West Addison in the 30th Ward. This is the Villa District. Proposed renovations of a 1.5-story bungalow, including the enlargement of windows, rear addition, rooftop skylights. And Larry, this is yours as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a smaller but deceptively complex project Let's give give a second for the slides to pop up here. It's working, it's working. Excellent. Okay, so the Villa District was designated by City Council in 1983 and contains excellent examples of the Prairie and Craftsman style. The single-family home at 3804 West Addison is a bungalow constructed in 1915 and exhibits restrained use of Craftsman and Prairie style detailing, including wide projecting eaves, low-pitched roof, and art glass windows on the east elevation. The building is being renovated to accommodate the owner's parents. Now, the owners live immediately adjacent to this building at the bungalow at 3800 West Addison, and the alterations are intended to make it more accessible by allowing single-level living for an occupant in a wheelchair. Work includes reducing the interior height of the first floor by 4 feet to eliminate the needs for stairs or ramps. This also requires lowering of the front door entrance to grade. The existing windows on all elevations are proposed to be modified, and those on the front are proposed to be extended downward by 2 feet to accommodate the change in floor height while allowing them to be operated by someone in a wheelchair. The applicant proposes to construct a rear addition which projects into the east side yard, which they maintain as required for wheelchair accessibility. In addition, several skylights are proposed for the east slope of the roof. The district designation only requires reviews to changes to the exterior and roof line of the building, but obviously these modifications will impact the exterior features. The extent of this work also requires substantial interior demolition and reconstruction, and you can see some graphics up here to show you how much of the building needs to be removed in order to allow it to be extended back. So based on the applicant's submittal, and this was confirmed by staff during a site visit, the brick below the existing windows on the projecting front porch is not original. It varies slightly from the historic brick in color, texture, length, as well as coursing. The applicant removed portions of this brick to reveal that the original cladding below the windows was likely stucco, which would have matched the cladding of the adjacent bungalow at 3800. Now, both of these buildings were designed by the same architect and built at the same time. No building permit could be found to determine when these porch alterations occurred. The applicant proposes to remove the non-original brick and replace it with new stucco to match the inset and texture of the adjacent bungalow. Staff recommends that this work meets the Commission's guidelines. Now, the existing double hung windows on the front facade extend up to the roof eave and are approximately 6 feet in height. The applicant proposes to lower the sills of these windows by 2 feet, resulting in a window height of 8 feet. They also propose to install casement and transom window configurations with muntin divisions, similar to the historic windows on the adjacent bungalow to the east. The revised sill height is designed to meet the ADA maximum overhead reach requirement of 4 feet. Historic preservation guidelines require that the original window sizes and configurations be maintained on primary elevations. In cases where it can be demonstrated that the existing window openings are not original to the property, alterations may be permitted. In this case, the applicant has documented changes to the exterior cladding of the porch, which raises the possibility that the existing window sizes may not be original to the building. Therefore, the insertion of taller windows, which are compatible with the historic character of the building type and style, may be an acceptable treatment for this particular property and will not adversely impact the character of the building or the district. To further accommodate the lowering of the first floor, the front door sill is proposed to be lowered approximately 2 feet. The existing height and width of the door will be maintained, and a new transom window is proposed to be located above the door. The existing door is non-historic, and the proposed door configuration is compatible with the Craftsman style of the building. The Commission has previously approved of lowering windows or doors to accommodate changing needs of landmark buildings, particularly for commercial buildings. In this case, staff recommends that lowering the sill at the entrance for greater accessibility will not adversely impact the historic character of the building. The building is located on a lot with 36 feet of frontage along Addison and 120 feet in depth. The side yard of the west is approximately 3 feet, and the side yard on the east is approximately 7 feet 8 inches. The building is set back approximately 16.5 feet from the front property line. As you can see here, the applicants are proposing to construct a rear addition, and this rear addition, it actually projects out into the east side yard about 3 feet 7 inches, and this will be visible from the public right-of-way. This projecting feature is approximately 56 feet from the front property line and 39 feet behind the front facade of the building. The applicant has provided a rendering to illustrate the visual impact of the addition as seen from Addison. According to the applicant, this extension is necessary to allow the required circulation for a wheelchair without modifying the building such that it encroaches into the minimum rear yard setback or exceeding the rear yard open space requirement as established by the zoning code. While this element will be visible in the gangway between these two homes, staff recommends that the width of the projection and its setback from the front of the home are sufficient to mitigate any adverse impact to the historic characteristics of the building. In response to the required extent of demolition required, staff is recommending that an engineer's report be submitted to address the proposed removal of rear walls, interior walls, floor structure, and any partial removal of roof structure and the proposed new construction relative to how the building should be braced and protected during the removal and construction. So we are recommending approval with these recommended conditions, which pretty much I touched on in my presentation. I do want to mention that we do have a letter of support from the Villa community group in your packets, and that the alderman is also aware of the project, but we have not received a letter from them. That's the extent of my presentation. If you have any questions for me, I believe the representatives for the project are also on the call.
Thank you, Larry. Does the committee have any questions of Larry at this time?
I do.
Yes.
So this one is really new for me. We've never had an ADA compliance property come before the permit review committee in my time here. So ADA is law, and we are another form of law. So how exactly does that work, Larry?
So there is a certain amount of flexibility for landmark projects to address ADA requirements if those requirements adversely impact significant architectural features of the building. In this case, we really didn't open up the whole ADA discussion because we felt that the modifications that they're proposing are compatible with the building. So there is a pathway to deal with more extensive interventions to landmark buildings. And that report is about 10 times longer than this one.
Okay.
So yeah, no, it's an important question, and we will deal with these again. And I'm thinking of a previous proposal where someone wanted a curb cut to address some accessibility requirements for somebody who needed it. And it was in a district where such a thing wouldn't be compatible, but it was able to be approved by sort of laying out the arguments and the flexibility provided by the ADA legislation. So even though I mentioned the ADA principles in the report, we would still, in theory, recommend approval of these modifications, even if that wasn't a necessary factor into the discussion.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's helpful, though, because it really explains and gives reasoning behind the modifications from the owner's side. I agree with the staff recommendations and the report, and I just want to, I don't know if the owner is here, but thank them for taking the steps of pushing, obviously addressing their needs of needing an ADA property, compliant property, but then also proposing modifications that are within the character of this historic property. So I'm not sure if they're here, but thanks, Larry, for the in-depth presentation and to the owners.
Commissioner Hughes, I just also want to add, if you want to see a good example of how ADA was addressed in this, the Lion House at Lincoln Park Zoo Also, we had to address that in years past, in previous years. So, and they did a really nice job with that in addressing that.
Which property did you say?
The Lion House at Lincoln Park Zoo.
Okay.
Commissioner Chekovich, also, I think you recall that. Any other questions of Larry at this time? If not, I'm going to ask the applicant if they are, is this Mr. Monshine?
The only question I have is on the window style, and if there's thought on that. It goes decidedly prairie, and just curious about that. I will say that I think that the proportions of the windows are, it's maybe good for the building. I think it's a nice change, and so I think rather the alternative is a lift. So I think that this is a really elegant solution. But my first question was about the windows and how that style comes about.
So I know that the adjacent building where the owner currently lives is 3800, and I believe that they restored and repaired those original windows. We don't know exactly what the windows looked like on 3804. We could not document through photos or drawings or anything else. However, given how these buildings were developed and constructed, it's likely that there was some relationship between the window styles. And I believe that the architect was inspired by those historic windows to design something compatible in this case.
Correct. Yeah, this is Michael Monshine from CMMR. And given the unique history that these two buildings were permitted and constructed together, we definitely used that as our inspiration for restoring the window and the porch in particular. We just had a strong sense that the existing two double hungs that were just not quite right. Certainly we've pushed them down to make our ADA requirements work well, but we still wanted to definitely pay homage to the neighboring property and those details. So we try to keep that scale and pattern and rhythm together. And I think it's working well. And on behalf of the owners and ourselves, also like to certainly thank the commission for their review and consideration, and a big thanks to Larry for all of his assistance and guidance getting us here. We appreciate it very much.
Does the committee have any? Go ahead, Commissioner Osmond.
I just want to comment that I think it's wonderful that historic bungalows make such a large part of the fabric of Chicago. And so often we see, either lifts or long ramps. I want to really thank the owner for taking this initiative at doing something that really preserves the historic fabric, but also sets an example for what we can expect as people try to age in place. And I think this is really a good example that we can follow.
Excellent. Thank you.
I want to kind of echo that as well as I'd like to ask whether the owners, if I could adopt the owners as my kids, because my kids would never do this for me.
All you can do is ask. You get in line.
This is the owner right here.
I would love
by
to
the way,
adopt you
Ernest,
guys.
my name is Ernie, but I don't know if you can hear me, but
yes.
Ernest, there's already an Ernie in the family, so I don't know if I could do that.
I'll be the senior. All right. Well, thanks so much. Does the committee have any other questions of the applicant? If not, I'd like to call for a motion to approve the staff recommendations.
So moved.
That's Commissioner Hughes in a second.
Second.
Commissioner Chekovich, seconds. I'll do the roll call. Commissioner Gary,
Yes.
Commissioner Osmond,
Yes.
and I am approving that as well, that it passes unanimously. Good luck, Ernie, and Mike, a great job.
Thank you.
And we look forward to seeing this as it gets carried out.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
With that, there's no further business. I'd like to request a motion to adjourn. Yes?
So moved.
Yeah.
Seconded.
Okay, we're out of here. Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a
Great
good
job,
day.
folks. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.